Back on YouTube today with another video for Big 12 week. Of course, we're taking a week or 4 or 5 days and dedicating it to each of the Power 5 conferences. And up today, we're going to rank the big coaches within the Big 12. Of course, we started these conference weeks out with the ACC. I'll put a link somewhere up here to the playlist of ACC videos if you guys missed any of those and you want to check them out. Then we moved on to the Big 10. That was last week, basically. We ranked the coaches there too, several other videos. I'll put a link to the Big 10 videos too. You click back and check those out if you want to. But we're in the middle of Big 12 week now, and today we're going to rank the coaches within the Big 12.
We about to turn it on.
Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on YouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also, and in addition to that as well, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. College football season coming up soon, and I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Sometimes they're even watchable. I don't know about this one though. Give this video a thumbs up too. It doesn't take you any time. It really helps me out a ton, and I would really appreciate it. So go ahead and slap that thumbs up button and share this video with your friends if you enjoy it. Let's get going with today's video. Okay, I'm going to rank these coaches the same way we did the ACC and the Big 10. So we're going to take a look at the new coaches. I'm not going to rank them in with the returning coaches. I just don't think it's fair to try to place a new coach in a conference somewhere within the ranks of the existing coaches, because I feel like if I do that, all I'm really doing is sort of placing them where I think their record would be. So it sort of would favor a coach who gets a job at a better team over a coach that maybe is taking a rebuilding job or something. So I'm just going to sort of talk about the new coaches separately here, and these are in no particular order with the new coaches. But of course, Chris Kleeman takes over at, or is it Kleiman? I don't know. Again, I'm not the one that names these people or comes up with these spellings, but he takes over for longtime Kansas State head coach Skeletor. He takes over for longtime Kansas State head coach Bill Snyder, right? Where's he come from? North Dakota State. Where do we know that name from? Well, they've been probably the most dominant program in all of college football. More dominant than Alabama, more dominant than Clemson. Of course, they're an FCS program, but they won 4 of the last 5 national championships there at North Dakota State. Just an unbelievable run that the Bison... yeah, I think it's the Bison, have been on. So he finally gets his shot at a big-time Power 5 school, coming in at Kansas State this year. We'll see how he does year 1. All right, and then you got Texas Tech with new head coach Matt Wells, right? Comes from Utah State. Utah State, a perennial basement dweller. Not a good program, sub 500 record over the course of its history, but much better than that under Matt Wells, right? He was there for 6 years, I think. Last 2 years, or he had 2 10-win seasons and a 9-win season during that 6-year period. So what Matt Wells was able to do at Utah State, way better than what they're used to doing, right? Finished first or tied for first twice in the conference out there. Not a Power 5 conference, it's a Group of 5 school, but he gets his shot now in the Power 5 at Texas Tech. All right, another guy getting their first head coaching opportunity here within the Power 5. Neil Brown takes over at West Virginia for Dana Holgorsen, who sort of abruptly up and left at the end of last season. To me, one of the weirder coaching changes of last season. I know West Virginia fans were a little disappointed about how the season ended, but West Virginia was a pretty good team last year, consistently within the top 25. Didn't make it to the Big 12 title game, but had a pretty good season. Dana Holgorsen decides to leave. He's now at Houston. West Virginia brings in Neil Brown. Now, Neil Brown a name that a lot of people around the Southeast are familiar with. Of course, he comes from Troy. He was there for 4 years. His first year at Troy, he took over a terrible program. He went 4-8. The 3 years after that, though, 10 wins, 11 wins, and 10 wins, right? I think he's going to win at West Virginia. I like this guy. I think he's going to be successful in the Power 5. Not this year, though. West Virginia has a lot of issues that are bigger than head coach. I'm not sure it would matter what head coach you put at West Virginia this year. They lost a ton of talent off of last year's team. The majority of you look at the top 5 players or whatever on that team, the majority of them are gone. Of course, Will Greer at quarterback, some NFL wide receivers. And then they've just been eaten alive by the transfer portal. It's sort of weird. I guess maybe it has to do with the coaching change. Yeah, their top 2 safeties actually transfer out about a month ago, real late into the offseason to be transferring out. So they got to find replacements for those guys. They didn't have the best defensive personnel to start with. QB issues this year. So I think it'll be a rough year 1 for Neil Brown at West Virginia, but I think the long-term outlook is good. I like this hire here with Neil Brown. We'll see how he does year 1 at West Virginia. And of course, the hire that made the biggest splash, or at least garnered the biggest headlines, Kansas goes out and gets Les Miles out of semi-retirement, I guess. Of course, he was let go from LSU several years ago, been sort of in and out of the broadcast booth the last couple of years. He takes over now at Kansas, one of the worst teams in the Power 5 historically over the last few years, especially winning a bunch of 1, 2, and 3 win seasons there at Kansas. One of 5 active coaches with a national championship, Les Miles is. So, is he terrible? No. I'm not sure how well anyone could do at Kansas, though, to be honest. Les Miles, not a guy that's really known as being an offensive genius. Of course, a lot of his best LSU teams known for their defense. Not that they didn't have a lot of great offensive players when he was at LSU. They did. But most people associate LSU's best seasons with defense. Even now, you look at LSU, whatever you want to rate their offense and the defense is going to be higher. Now, their offense has a chance to be really good this year. Anyway, this isn't about LSU. But I just wonder how successful a coach like Les Miles, who's not known to have a very creative or innovative style of offense on his team, is going to do within the Big 12. And one of the knocks on Les Miles at LSU was that he sort of tried to micromanage his offensive coordinator. If Les Miles just leaves the offense alone and lets the coordinator do his thing at Kansas, I think that would be better in the long run. Not just for Kansas, but for any Les Miles coached team. We'll see. It's going to be a rough couple of years. Kansas has a terrible scholarship situation because they recruited and signed a whole bunch of JUCO players over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm not going to get into that whole story, but you sign a JUCO player, you only get him for a couple of years. You sign a freshman, of course, you get him for 4 or 5. You're only allowed to sign 25 players a year. So when you're signing a JUCO player, you're only getting him for 2 years. He's gone. You have to replace him in recruiting, but then you also have to replace the guys that have been there for 4 or 5 years that are... Anyway, the point is, they're not going to be at their full scholarship number for a couple of years, and they're not able to sign the full number of scholarship players for the next couple of years. You can look into that on your own. It's a complicated story. Recruiting and the numbers involved are sort of notoriously hard to sort of understand anyway. But the point is, they don't have a good roster. They can't recruit at 100% over the next couple of years. It's going to be rough for Les Miles. Obviously, this will be the best coach that Kansas has had in a long, long time, if not ever. And I do think Les Miles is worth a couple of wins on his own. So instead of winning 1 or 2 games, I expect Kansas to maybe win 3 or 4 games. If they win 5 games, you have to consider that a huge success, I think, this year. But we'll see how he does. All right, now I'm going to rank the returning coaches within the Big 12. Of course, the Big 12 has 10 teams. It doesn't make any sense, but they do. No one wants to join that conference for obvious reasons. So 4 new coaches, 6 returning coaches. I'm going to rank them in order from 6 to 1. I'm going to start here with Matt Rule at Baylor. It's not that I think Matt Rule is a terrible coach. I do think he's the worst coach of these remaining 6, though. And, of course, he takes over a Baylor program that was sort of in the gutter following some sexual assault type stuff that was going on down there with Art Briles and some of the administration. So he's had a rough road to hoe. I probably shouldn't have said rough road to hoe given the assault allegation. Anyway, Anyway, a tough spot for Matt Rule. I mean, he's done okay, I guess, considering what he has to work with. But again, ranking Matt Rule 6th here is not necessarily an indictment on Matt Rule. It's more of just proof of where Baylor is, kind of, and a testament to the 5 coaches that are higher that I honestly just think are better head coaches. But I've got Matt Rule, Baylor, at number 6. All right, at number 5, I struggled with this one because I think this guy's a really good head coach, and I hope he didn't. I hope he didn't make a decision he's going to regret at some point down the road. Matt Campbell, Iowa State. Iowa State traditionally not a powerhouse program, right? I mean, everyone knows that. He's managed to get 8 wins there each of the last 2 seasons, going I think 8 and 5 both seasons. He had an opportunity to get out of there and maybe take another Power 5 job, and he's turned it down. Obviously, if he keeps winning at Iowa State, and winning at Iowa State is not going 10-2 or 11-1 and competing for Big 12 titles. Winning at Iowa State is winning 8 games a year. If he continues to win 8 games a year or more at Iowa State, I think he will have additional opportunities down the road. If for some reason he tails off, he may wish he made a move when he had the chance. But anyway, I've got him 5th on this list. Here we go here now. Number 4. This guy has a 63% winning percentage at his current school, right? Tom Herman, Texas. He hasn't been there long. So Texas fans are probably going to say he's the best or second best coach in the Big 12. I understand what being a homer is all about. I get it. But the reality is he's been there a couple of years, about 500 his first year, wasn't he? I think he was 6-6 and then won his bowl game to finish 7-6. Last year, 4 losses. What did he go? Was it 10-4? Beat Oklahoma in the regular season, which was huge. Lost a close one to him in the Big 12 title game. Won a big game in the postseason over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, 28-21 over Georgia. But he's inconsistent, isn't he? He lost to Maryland each of his first 2 years. That's sort of a head scratcher. I think it was Texas Tech, not a good team he lost to his first year there. So he's got to figure out a way to get his team to play their best week in and week out. I mean, we saw how good Texas can be in the Georgia game and against Oklahoma, really both times, even in the loss to Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game. I thought Texas played well enough to win that game. Things just didn't go their way at the end. But you can't play at that level against Oklahoma and Georgia and then turn around and lose to teams like Maryland and Texas Tech. You got to be more consistent. And of course, speaking of Tom Herman, if you haven't checked out the Zach Smith podcast, you need to. Just Google it, Zach Smith podcast. You'll be glad you did. Zach Smith has a lot to say about our boy Tom Herman. Not all of it is flattering. In fact, very little of it, if any, is at all. I don't know. What do y'all think Tom Herman thinks about Zach Smith these days? Hope that's not distracting your boy Tom Herman if you're a Texas fan, but I guess we'll find out. This year. Tom Herman could easily move up this list with a couple of better seasons here, even this year. Some people have him winning the Big 12. I expect him to at least be competing to win the Big 12 this year. We'll see if they can do it. But if he has another couple of seasons like he had last year, he could easily move up this list. But right now, I've got him at 4. All right, 3rd, I've got Mike Gundy, right? Is that his name? Oklahoma State. Remember when he was 40?
I'm a man. I'm 40.
Yeah, I do. He's probably about 45 now. Got himself a mullet. Been at Oklahoma State for a long time. Won the Big 12 title in 2011. That's one of the reasons I decided to put him ahead of Tom Herman. Winning a conference has to mean something here. And on top of that, he's got a better. He's got a better winning percentage at Oklahoma State than Tom Herman does at Texas. So again, that could easily change. If you're a Texas fan, that could easily change with a couple more good seasons out of Tom Herman at Texas. But right now, Mike Gundy, 67% winner. Tom Herman was 63. And like I mentioned, winning the Big 12 title in 2011. Plus, Mike Gundy provides a lot of entertainment value. The I'm 40 thing, we all remember that from 5 or 6 years ago, whenever it was. He also had an epic rant this last season about Twitter. If I can find a clip of it. I'll put it up now and let you see it.
How vital was it to you that he gets off to a good start in this game?
Criticism where? From where?
Outside noise.
From where?
Twitter, radio.
Yeah.
Oh, I give a rat's about Twitter. It's a platform for people that are sitting home drawing an unemployment check, sitting in front of a keyboard.
Coach Tyler had a really big game first
I'm
half.
not disregarding what you're saying. Trust me, I get it at my own house. But I mean, I just kind of felt like that social media and Twitter's what's destroying this country anyway. So that's how I feel about it, from politics to sports to whatever. It gives people a platform to bitch, and then other people are like needling it, and they're sitting at home and they're late on a payment. So anyway, that's how I feel.
Absolutely hilarious though. But yeah, I've got our boy Mike Gundy coming in third, coaches in the Big 12. All right, number 2, Gary Patterson. You know, I knew Gary Patterson had been at TCU for a long time. I knew he was a pretty good coach. How long has Gary Patterson been at TCU? Quick. 20 years. Do you know how hard that is to do in Power 5 football? Next to impossible. Now, it used to happen all the time. Coaches like Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno and people like, hell, even Mark Richt was at UGA for 16 or 17 years. You rarely see this anymore in modern big-time football. Gary Patterson has managed to keep his job at TCU for 20 years. A really good season, all-time great season, really, back in, I think it was 2014, I believe it was. They split the Big 12 title that year because that was when the Big 12 was trying to pretend that title games were stupid and didn't matter. Remember that? They acted like everyone else was doing it wrong and they were the only ones that do it right. The one true... They had this whole campaign. And so here's what you have to remember about that. The Big 12 basically crumbled and fell apart. Teams moved on. And they didn't have enough teams. At that particular time, the NCAA had a bylaw. You had to have a minimum of 12 teams in your conference in order to play a conference championship game. They didn't and still don't. They have 10. So they weren't allowed to have a conference championship game for a couple of years back then. This was one of those years. And they came up with this whole campaign, this whole ad thing that they were doing about how the Big 12, one true champion. They were doing it right. And everyone else was doing it wrong, right? They only had 10 teams, so they were able to do a round robin, and they still do this. Every team plays every other team within the conference. Other conferences don't do that. Why? Because there's 14 teams in the other conferences. In the Pac-12, the ACC and SEC anyway. And you only play 12 games. You can't play them all to split into 2 divisions. You guys know how that works. So anyway, Big 12 comes out with this whole thing about how we're doing it right. Everyone else is doing it wrong. We have a round robin, which is going to result in the only conference that has one true champion. And what happens? They come out and get a split championship here between TCU and Baylor. But anyway, Gary Patterson won 73% of his games over a 20-year period. That's nothing to sneeze at, right? Finished third in the final poll in 2014. I wrote some other stuff down here and I can't even read it. Must not matter that much. But anyway, I got Gary Patterson coming in 2 on this list. All right, and of course that leaves Lincoln Riley number 1. I mean, there's no big surprise there, right? Takes over for legendary Oklahoma coach Bob Stoops. And in what has become an exception to a generally accepted rule, he was able to succeed after the guy. There's an old saying, right? You don't want to be the guy after the guy, right? Your program has a great coach. He retires or whatever. You don't want to be the guy that replaces that guy. There's an old saying, you don't want to be the guy that replaces the guy. You want to be the guy that replaces the guy that replaced the guy. That wasn't the case for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley stepped in at OU, and they have not missed a beat, winning at least 11 games in the regular season every year that he's been there, making the college football playoff every year that he's been there. 2 Heisman-winning quarterbacks in the 2 years that he's been there. They've lost in the first round of the playoffs, but still, just to get to the playoffs, not an easy thing to do. So winning at a consistent level, Lincoln Riley is at OU. Talent-wise, they're obviously the most talented team, especially offensively within the Big 12. Defensively, maybe you want to look at TCU or Texas, but they definitely have the most powerful, dynamic, high-powered offense within the Big 12, and it showed. Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray winning the Heisman each of the last 2 years. This year they bring Jalen Hurts in, transfer from Alabama, had some success there. Of course, lost a starting job to Tua Tagovailoa. So Hurts transferred out into Oklahoma. Weird situation at Oklahoma with the quarterbacks. Both Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and now Jalen Hurts, all three of Lincoln Riley's starting quarterbacks, transfers into Oklahoma. So, I don't know, sort of an Auburn thing going on there where they're not able to recruit any quarterbacks out of high school that are able to do anything. They got to go back to you got to go back a long way. 2013 or 2014, something like that, to find an Oklahoma quarterback that was recruited out of high school that won a game. A long string of transfer quarterbacks at OU, but it's worked out, so I'm not knocking it. It's definitely worked out. Like I mentioned, back-to-back Heisman winners. I don't think anybody expects Jalen Hurts to win the Heisman, but I think he'll have success there in that offense. And listen, you can hate Oklahoma all you want. If you make any list of coaches and it doesn't have Lincoln Riley #1, you're just out of your mind. But anyway, that's the list, Big 12 coaches. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow with another Big 12 video. Have a good morning.
Turn it on.